Tonight, I'm happy to share with you the annual data presentation, which reflects the 2018-2019 assessments. We're going to begin by reviewing our elementary data, which reflects PSSA data from grade 3 to 8. We'll be starting looking at our math and English, language arts, and science. As you're probably aware, the PSSAs are given in grades 3 to 8 for math and English, language arts, and grades 4 and 8 for science. This is the dashboard from eMetrics, which really compares and represents the state performance by grade for English language arts. And for each grade, you can see the district and the state data reflected. Highlighted in gray, you'll see the district data. And what this represents is the percentage of students that are proficient, advanced, basic, and below basic on the English language arts by grade. You'll see the grade listed on the left column over here. And the numbers in the center represent the percentage of students in each of those categories. What we'll see here in this trend is that it's quite impressive. What we're seeing is that all grade levels are significantly above the state percentage of students who are proficient or advanced. But what we are also seeing is, if I can direct your attention to the light blue over here, our percentage of students who are advanced. What's quite impressive is the percentage of students who are advanced in most cases are exceeding both the basic and below basic combined, which is truly an impressive number when we're looking at the achievement of our students. So not only are our students achieving and scoring proficient on these assessments, but they are really doing very well. They're really exceeding the benchmark. When we look at our mathematics, we see the same trend as well. In most cases, you'll see that number of, or the percentage of students who are advanced in this case, either exceed or are very close to the percentage of students who are basic and below basic combined as well. And in all cases, we're also exceeding the state averages as well. In reviewing this data represents both ELA and math 5-year cohort data. So if you look at, on the left side, you'll see grade 3 starting in 2015, and that moves all the way up to grade 7 in 2019. In reviewing previous presentations, one of the areas that I've heard that's important to the board is understanding how the cohort data looks. So that's what this slide represents. When we look at PSSA data, many times we compare the percentages within the grade level, which can help us identify curricular needs, however, sometimes is limited in scope because you're not looking at the same group of students. In this slide, when we compare our cohort data, we can see our math and English language arts across 5 years. This graph shows us how students have started in 3rd grade in 2015 and how they're progressing into in 7th grade in 2019. And we see this overall trend of growth for both ELA and mathematics. This slide represents our science achievement, which also is extremely high. You can see the district data is represented in gray for both 4th grade and 8th grade. Those are the only 2 years that science is taken for PSSAs. And again, once again, if I can draw your attention to the percentage of students who are scoring advanced on that PSSA is quite impressive, with 59% of our students scoring advanced for a total of 93.3% in 4th grade science, which is really tremendous. That number across the state tends to drop off a bit for 8th grade, but what you'll see here is we continue to maintain that high level of achievement for 8th grade, with 85% of our students scoring proficient or advanced, and 49% of those students scoring advanced, which again is quite impressive when you look at those numbers. At this time, I'm going to dive into each of the school-specific data. The Future Ready Index is the newest accountability measure for the Department of Education. There are multiple measures associated with the Future Ready Index, including state assessment measures, on-track measures, and college and career measures. Within these 3 categories are several data points. Within the PA Future Ready Index, this was launched in 2018, so this is relatively new for us, but is not the first time we're seeing it. The purpose of the Future Ready Index was to move away from a single summative score to reflect student performance and how schools were doing. As a result, the Future Ready Index reports on these 3 main categories, and you can see that there are a host of other data points that are also shared within the PA Future Ready Index. For the purpose of this presentation, we can't possibly dig into all of these data points because I would fear we might be here till tomorrow if I were to do that. But all of this information is available on the Future Ready PA Index, and you can dive deeper into that data as well. But we'll be doing a comprehensive review of this, just not getting into every single data point. The Future Ready PA Index reports on the several measures I mentioned in the previous slide. When a school meets or exceeds a goal that's been set by the state for a 2030 state goal, you'll see the category represented in blue. So there's two ways that the data is presented. First is represented by colors, where you'll see blue represents that the data has met or exceeds the statewide goal. And again, this is a goal that's been developed and set for the state to meet in 2030. The green represents an interim goal. The state has recognized that the goal that has been set for 2030 is quite a lofty goal, and so they've set benchmark interim goals along the way that districts can also show progress towards meeting those goals. So you'll see that represented in green here. When you see red, that is showing that you're not meeting either the statewide goal or the interim goal that's been developed. In addition to the colors, you'll also see an arrow up, which indicates that the data represents an increase from the previous year. A circle represents a relatively maintained achievement from the previous year, and an arrow down represents a decrease in performance. So you'll see a combination of both the colors and the arrows on the next few slides. Presented here is the dashboard for Brook Elementary. In the left-hand column, the top measure reflects the state assessment measures, and this represents the percent proficient advanced on the English language arts assessment. You'll look at this top measure right up here. As you can see here, not only has Brook exceeded the statewide target, but they've also increased from the previous year. The second measure in this category represents the English language arts, and in this example for Brook Elementary, you can see that they have met the statewide target, but they relatively maintained their achievement from the previous year. The third represents mathematics proficiency, and in this instance, you'll see that we've not yet met the statewide target, but we are showing green, which indicates that we have met the interim target that the state has set, and it also indicates that we have improved from the previous year. And the final measure in this category is the growth measure for math, which is also blue and indicates that we've met that statewide goal. On the right-hand side, you'll see the on-track measures, which represents English language growth and attainment. And in this example, Brook is going to be the only elementary school that will have this particular category. And then the final representation here is your regular attendance, which again is represented in blue, showing that we've exceeded the statewide target for that. This slide represents Brook Elementary School PSSA scores by grade, and subject. The top two lines you'll see represented third grade and fourth grade ELA scores. And on the column on the right-hand side, you'll see the state comparison, and it'll indicate that we exceed the state comparison here. So this is a combination of students who are proficient and advanced. The next columns you'll see math proficiency for grades 3 and 4, again reflecting that we are well above the statewide comparison as well. And the final row represents the science scores for Brook Elementary. We're also proud to share that Brook Elementary is ranked 3rd out of 77 schools in Montgomery County for 4th grade ELA, and we are ranked 11th out of 88 schools for Montgomery County in science. So in comparison to the county, we're doing quite well. This score digs a little bit deeper into the data and looks at the 5-year trend of 3rd grade data. Something that's important to note about this data is that we're not looking at the same cohort of students every year. So this is 3rd grade across several years, but they are different groups of students. This information is helpful because it helps to identify, and we take a look at this and say, is our curriculum where it needs to be? Is there anything that's jumping out, any major areas that we need to really focus on? And what you will see is that there are some dips in data, and there always will be dips in data. But what we do as a building is work to dig through that data and see what story that's telling us, and what can we make, what changes can we make, and what improvements can we make. This slide represents the same as the previous slide, but this is fourth grade data instead of third grade data. And what you'll see here is on the left-hand side, you have ELA in the darker blue. Then you'll see math in the center column, and you'll see science in the right-hand column. So this is our fourth grade data, and if I can draw your attention, overall we're seeing an upward trend throughout the several years. But again, keep in mind that this is fourth grade data throughout several years, so you are looking at different cohorts of students. But what this is telling us overall, when you see this upward trend of data or consistent data, is that for the most part your curriculum is in place, it's solid, it's working. Do you need to make some tweaks? Absolutely. You need to adjust and move with your students and identify what your students' needs are, but overall it's showing a tremendous strength in fourth grade. This slide specifically targets cohort data from grade 3 to 4 at Brook Elementary, and these are only students who were with us for both years of testing. And so what you'll see on the left-hand side, the darker blue represents ELA, and the second column, the lighter blue, represents math. And what you can see is overall, when students are with us for 2 years, we've seen tremendous growth, moving our ELA from 76.3% to 88.8%. Moving our math from 60% to 70%. So again, this is following that cohort of data. Going back to the PA Future Ready Index, this is a snapshot of when you start to dig deeper into that initial dashboard to see what pieces all contribute to those initial circles. This is taken directly from the Future Ready Index, and it represents the percent proficient advanced on the PSSAs in comparison to the state average. So when you look at this, the column on the left represents English Language Arts, the one in the center represents math, and the one on the right represents science. Our scores across the building for Brook is identified on the top column, or I'm sorry, on the top row. The middle represents the state average, and as you can see, we are far exceeding the state average. And the bottom row represents the statewide 2030 goal. As I mentioned previously, if we hit that 2030 goal, then it'll appear as blue. If we've not yet hit that, but we've hit the interim goal, you'll see that pictured as red. And I'm happy to present that you will see all blues and greens as we go along this presentation.
Dr. Meyer, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So just to clarify, this is the entire building, right? So regardless of...
Correct.
This is third and fourth together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just trying to tie numbers back to previous slides.
Absolutely. And
Thank
what's
you.
nice is on the platform, you can then dig deeper into there and you can see all the metrics. And what our buildings have been doing is going through and doing that. You can't possibly focus on every data point all the time because you'll never get to actually do anything. But what we do is we look and see what's jumping out to us. What are the needs? What is this data telling us? And then those are the areas that you dig deeper into. And then you can also disaggregate it and look at your demographic data and see what that's really telling you. Something else that our teachers have been working on doing is triangulating that with our NWA map data, which was new for us last year. So being able to see, does the story of PSSA tell the same story of our map data? And what is this telling us about our student needs? So our principals have been working very hard with our data teams within each building and our curriculum supervisors to really break that down. And again, each building is going to focus on something different based on their need and their data. We'll now shift over to Evans Elementary School. Again, we'll go back to the initial data dashboard. This shows you your overall, starting on the top, English Language Arts, your growth in English Language Arts, your math, and your growth in math, and then your on-track measures on the right side. I mentioned before, Brook Elementary is the only one who has this top target, so you'll see this appearing blank for all the schools moving on. With all of the elementary schools, you'll see the exact same slides presenting the data, so I'm not going to read every data point to you, but I'm going to try and focus on some of the highlights. In this again represents your English Language Arts for grades 3 and 4, math for 3 and 4, and science. And what's interesting too is again just seeing how far above the state average Evans Elementary is performing, which is quite impressive. A point to celebrate for Evans Elementary is that they are ranked 15 out of 80 in Montgomery County for third grade ELA, ranked 20 out of 77 for fourth grade ELA, and 13th out of 88 in Montgomery County for science. Again, this score represents our third grade trends. This is 2015 to 2019, so you're looking at your third grade each year, not cohort data. So what this is really telling us is that we are seeing this overall trend of growth, some peaks, some dips, but overall trend of growth, which is showing us that there's consistency in our curriculum and some pretty steady improvement that's going across the years. If you look at our ELA data that starts in 2015, where we're starting at 75.4% proficient and moving 5 years later to 86 at Evans is quite substantial. This represents your 4th grade trends in Evans Elementary. And again, not only are we seeing high performance, but we're also seeing growth and an upward trend throughout the building. For Evans Elementary, we're seeing our cohort data is also showing high signs of maintaining that high proficiency with math, but growing significantly also with English language arts. But please keep in mind that although that we see that the data is maintained and may not see as much of a peak, and in this instance, we are seeing a slight decrease in our data, it doesn't mean that our students are not growing. Keeping in mind that this is cohort data, so they're moving to a more complex test the next year, we're still moving our students and still growing our students, and they're making that year's worth of growth. So even though we might see a slight dip in a graph such as this is still representing that our students are still moving an entire grade level and still maintaining that high level of proficiency. When we look in comparison to the state average, again, we are seeing that our English language arts and our biology are exceeding that 2030 target already, and that they are very closely approaching the 2030 target for math and are only off by 0.5 percentage point to meeting that. Moving to Limerick Elementary, once again, you'll see the dashboard here. You'll see all of our contents either blue or green in this instant as well. In this slide, you'll see the comparison, again, for ELA, math, and science for grades 3 and 4, and you'll see, again, the comparison to the state as well, which we are doing very well in Limerick as well. We are happy to share that we're ranked 21st out of 77 in Montgomery County for 4th grade ELA and ranked 8th out of 88 for science. Overall, looking at our 3rd grade trends, we're seeing consistency with our 3rd grade population. We're seeing consistency within our test scores, a few peaks, but overall we are seeing this trend here. There was a significant growth from last year's data when you're looking at your 3rd grade from 2018, moving up to 71.4%, which is quite a significant and impressive growth there. In this slide, we're looking again at our 4th grade trends, and I'd like to draw your attention to the math data from 2018 to 2019. This data, I think, can be deceiving. This graph is representing a decrease from 4th grade proficiency in mathematics, but we need to remember that they're looking at the students in 2018 in 4th grade and in 2019, so they're not the same students testing, but this is definitely one of the examples where we do see a decrease in data, and we're going to dig deeper into that. What is this data telling us? Why did that happen? And start to really do a root cause analysis of what's going on there. When digging into that data, we're going to track the students to see how each student performs, and then also look at, again, at that NWEA map. Is that telling us the same story and really helping us to identify what's going on there? I would also like to draw your attention to the cohort data in 3rd grade in 2018, which grew from a proficiency of 58.7 to 69.9 proficient in advanced, which is a significant increase as well. This slide, once again, represents our cohort data. So what's interesting is that although we see some drops, when you look at our cohort data, again, these are only the students that have been with us for both years, we see some significant gains for those students. So we are looking at, when we're looking at this data, it's telling us that when our students are with us, our students are growing, and we're doing a really great job with that. When we look at the data dashboard, digging into the comparison to the state average, you'll see Limerick Elementary is either green or blue in all of our categories. You'll see we are very close to closing the gap between our statewide goal and where we are currently scoring for both math and ELA, but we have met the interim targets for both of those examples. I'd also like to draw your attention to the science, which is an exceptional number. 94.5%. So I'd be remiss if we didn't celebrate that with Limerick Elementary, that 94.5% of our students are scoring proficient and advanced on that science PSSA, which is amazing. Moving into Oaks, once again, you'll see many examples of growth, and you'll see many examples of us already hitting the target. But we are seeing an area, one of our first areas that we really need to focus in and target and identify what's going on here. We have met as a team with the building principal. We are disaggregating that, and we're getting down to the student level and really trying to identify what our needs are here. When we do look at the comparison, though, what's interesting, even though we do have that one area where we didn't meet the target for growth, when we look at the state comparison, at Oaks, we are doing exceptionally well. So while we know and recognize that there's some areas that we need to focus on and look at the growth targets, we also take the time to celebrate the areas we're doing well, but we certainly won't forget those areas that we need to target. We are ranked 13th out of 80th in Montgomery County for third grade in ELA, 12th out of 77th for fourth grade ELA, and 26th out of 88 in Montgomery for science. When we look at our third grade trends, once again, it tells a very similar story to our other elementary schools, that when you look at our 5-year trend, we're seeing high, consistent achievement for students, and we're seeing kind of that being maintained, and also an upward trend here for Oaks for third grade. Same for fourth grade at Oaks. We are seeing, if I can draw your attention to where we started in 2015 and look at the growth that we've made over time, that actually may be one of the explanations that we have for why we're not necessarily meeting that growth. Because when you grow rapidly like this, sometimes it's hard to keep hitting that growth target time after time. So while I can't say that that is the answer, that is certainly a contributing factor when you look at your growth over time. This is where we saw that red on the initial slide, where we saw the downward trend here as far as third to fourth grade math. So this is certainly an area that we're focusing in on to see why this occurred. But if I could go back to this slide for a second too, I think again that helps us tell the story as well. But you will see the continual growth with ELA with this particular cohort as well. When we look at our dashboard, we are seeing, though, even though we have some areas where our students aren't, where we need to focus on as far as our growth targets, Oaks is hitting the statewide goal in all 3 categories. So once again, when you're high achieving and you're doing well, it's hard to sometimes maintain that. And that's what we see here, that this is certainly a lot to celebrate. Do we have an area we want to focus on and peel back that onion a little bit? Absolutely. But this is something to celebrate, that in all of our areas, we are exceeding meeting or exceeding the 2030 goal. Moving to Royersford Elementary, again, you will see that we are green and blue for both our achievement and our growth targets, as well as our attendance. And once again, this looks very similar to some of our other elementary schools, in that we are exceeding the state comparison quite nicely. When we look at our third grade trends, again, we're seeing an overall increasing trend and increasing growth. So our curriculum is maintaining and staying consistent. We are seeing a couple of dips, and it looks like we've also responded to a few of those dips in the past. So overall, we're seeing really nice data here as well for Royersford. When we look at the fourth grade data, this is another one that I really like to look at and just say, wow, there's some amazing things going on. When we look at 2015 and looking at where we've gone for fourth grade over the last several years, this is really showing a lot of hard work on the teacher's part, a lot of hard work on the student's part, and a lot of positives with our fourth grade at Royersford Elementary. When we look at the cohort data, again, these are students that were with us both in third and fourth grade. We are seeing a really nice growth here for ELA. Not as much of a growth, but again, this is showing that students are maintaining that achievement, which is what we want to see. It's not that they didn't grow, it's a harder test. It's the next year. So that's showing that they are maintaining their same level of proficiency. When we look at this dashboard, we're seeing again that our math and English language arts, while it's not quite at the 2030 target, we are very quickly approaching, and in some instances, we are definitely closing that gap, and that we are exceeding the target by 0.8% this year for Royal Elementary, so we're certainly celebrating that. Moving to Spring City, again, you will see mostly greens and blues in this, but this is again where we're seeing one of our areas that we need to target, and this is once again our growth target. So it's saying that looking at how we're improving with our student growth in English language arts at Spring City. Even though we do have that one area that we need to focus and target, we are seeing still that Spring City is doing a nice job in comparison to the states. We're proud of that. And once again, when we look at our third grade trends, looking at this 2015, where math, we were looking at about 50% proficiency, moving all the way up to 87.9%. 87.9% proficiency in math. That is tremendous growth over a short period of time. So really a lot to celebrate in regards to this. And again, we're seeing that same, we see a little bit more peaks and valleys with English language arts, but we're still seeing this overall trend of growth. But certainly this math is just truly something that we need to celebrate. Again, when we look at fourth grade, it's telling a very similar story. So you're seeing an overall trend of growth, and we're seeing across all of our elementaries, our science scores have consistently remained high throughout the years. And this is where we saw the red in the initial slide for Spring City. So we are looking to look at this cohort. I do want to draw your attention to this though, specifically with Spring City, we're looking at a very small number of students. This particular cohort is 20 students. So in this regard, while we're not accepting any student not achieving, we are looking at this does look drastic, but it's still a small percentage of students that we are analyzing, seeing why this happened, why we didn't see the growth from third to fourth grade. But in this instance, truly one student could make the difference. It could have been one student that was on the bubble and just went the wrong direction on that proficiency. So while this, I think, is one of the most dramatic slides in the presentation, I don't necessarily think that it is as dramatic as it might appear, but nonetheless, something that we are looking at and, again, doing a comparison with our map data to see, is it telling us the same story? Do we need to make some changes? When we look at this dashboard, again, we're doing exceptionally well. You see your English language arts is approaching the 2030 target, but we have met the interim target, and we have exceeded the statewide target for both math and science for Spring City. And finally, Upper Providence. We are seeing blues and greens for Upper Providence as well. In comparison to our state on the right side, we are doing tremendously well compared to our state counterparts. And once again, we are seeing tremendous growth for third grade. If I can draw your attention to the 2015 data for math and look at how that grew over the 5 years to 74.2% proficient. And once again, when you're looking at your ELA has remained consistently high, which is hard to say at that level. When we look at the fourth grade as well, we see once again that same overall trend of growth, high success with science, but an overall consistency across the board. And this, once again, we are seeing, again, growth with our ELA moving from 82 to 87% proficient, which is a significant growth within this specific cohort data. We are seeing a little bit of a drop in math here, so once again, we're working with the building data teams to uncover that piece. But when we look at our dashboard, we are seeing that Upper Providence is meeting every one of these statewide 2030 targets. So we're blue in all of those categories. So holistically, we reflected as a curriculum team to talk about, well, what does this mean? And this is really, truly just a very small snapshot of some of our action plans for the elementary buildings and some of the pieces that our teachers have been working hard at and our curriculum supervisors and administrators have already had in place. Kindergarten through second grade for math, we're focusing on our small group instruction and using our targeted instruction for all levels, which will really help us dig down to the student level with this data. The whole principle of this idea is that you're using data to design your instruction. We're focusing on visual math and number sense. In third grade, we are really focusing on hands-on fraction studies, which is a good representation of our curriculum supervisor digging into the data and saying, hey, we need to look at this fractions. We need to look at this specific component. So while I haven't necessarily listed all of those specific areas, please know that that's what our teams are doing. They're looking to see, maybe we need to make a tweak with place value and number sense and dig into that part deeper. For ELA, you'll see the same type of action plans focusing on our spring forward learning. We're looking at connecting teachers and collaborative and reflective practices around student needs. I've had the opportunity to sit in on some of the meetings where we're looking at student data and really determining what the best interventions and the best support that is needed. Planning and providing strategies that focus on the whole child so that we're not only recognizing that, yes, academic student numbers are important, but sometimes that's not the only answer. Sometimes there are other interventions that we can support students with that are not academic in nature, and that also really taking the whole student approach in recognizing that. And finally, developing a 3-year analysis plan that supports students K-8 with close reading, analysis, and commitment to professional development for all of our teachers. As you know, we have our focus on spring forward learning, and my little plug here, SF Learns, hashtag SF Learns. If you follow us, you can see all of the wonderful jobs that our coaches and our teachers are doing. What's great about spring forward learning is that we have professional development every day occurring. And our coaches and our supervisors are constantly in there looking at how we can just promote the wonderful things that our students are doing and our teachers are doing. This represents a little bit about what the concept of spring forward learning is, and it really gets to the heart of the data that I presented for our elementary buildings, in that we want to be, our 2 main pillars is that we're responsive in our instruction and that we're assessment driven. So assessment is not something that just happens at the end of learning to prove that we know something, but we're using an entire system of assessment, whether that's teacher-created assessments, whether it's small targeted checks, whether it's NWA MAP and PSSA, to then be responsive to our student needs. So it's something that our coaches are working with on a regular basis and supporting our teachers on ongoing professional development. So moving into grades 5 and 6. You will see a very similar dashboard with the addition of the college and career measures, which is located on the right side, which was not applicable to the elementary schools. So in this instance, we are seeing in many regards that we are meeting or exceeding our targets and our interim targets with the one focus area of growth, academic growth for English language arts. When we look at a comparison for 5th, 6th grade, you will see that we are doing exceedingly well compared to our state. This is representing, again, that 5-year trend of our PSSA data. This is specifically 5th grade now. So what we are seeing is an overall high trend here. Again, some dips that we have to draw our attention to, but both for ELA and math, certainly high achievement across the board. This represents our 6th grade trend. Again, these are moving from 2015 to 2019. These are different groups of students that we're looking across the board. When we really hone into it, we find that our English language arts, we are meeting the 2030 statewide target, and that we are approaching the 2013 target, which is showing that we've already met the interim target as well. Moving into 7th grade, you'll see mostly blues in 7th grade and one area where we're hitting the interim target. And once again, really high numbers as far as comparison to the state. When we look at our 7th grade data, what's really interesting when we go back to the cohort data, we are seeing that when students transition to a building, they do drop a little bit, and then over time, we're seeing growth. So this is not representing that cohort data, but this is showing us that we do expect some transition as students are changing buildings. We do expect some of that. But once again, when our students are with us, we're seeing growth over time, and the longer that they're with us, we're continuing to see that growth. This is what I was referring to as far as the cohort data. So when both of these lines are on the upward movement, and this trend moving from 2017 of fifth grade students moving up to 85%. Again, each year of this jump is representing a year's worth of growth and then some for many of our students. So we're really seeing some nice upward increases in this area. For seventh grade ELA and math, we've met the target for ELA, and we are quickly, very closely, very, very close to meeting the target for 2013 for math. Now we're going to move to eighth grade. Eighth grade again shows examples of tremendous achievement, and we're seeing the blues and the greens, and then this is one area that we're going to dig into a little bit deeper. I know this was a topic that was discussed in last year's board meeting, so this is going to be something with eighth grade we're going to dig into a little bit deeper, and I'm going to try and see what's going on here. When you look at the state comparison, again, we're doing exceedingly very well. And then when you look at the overall 5-year trend of our PSSA data, you'll see that, once again, this is pretty consistent across the board as far as where we are. This is representing the 8th grade math percent proficient and advanced on PSSAs. So again, you're looking at 2015, and then this is representing the state average, and this is representing where we are at Springford. I mentioned earlier, I know that this was a topic last year. It's a topic across the state, I think, and this is really going to help us. I wanted to dig into this part a little bit deeper. So while we are far exceeding the state expectation for math, this is an area that we're continuing to look at. What this represents is our math cohort data, percent proficient advanced on PSSA by grade. So you're looking at your 4th grade in 2015, and you're seeing this consistent slight increase, and then we have a peak in 7th grade, and then it drops off in 8th grade. Again, this is not unlike what we see in the state, but what we don't see typically across the state is this peak here in 7th grade as high as it is. So this is definitely something that makes this dip a little bit more dramatic, but when you look at it across the board, it's a little bit more consistent if we didn't have that outlier. This graph represents where we currently stand within the ranking within Montgomery County schools. Again, this represents percent proficient and advanced. So we have our schools listed in the bottom as well. And when I did a deeper dig into this, I tried to look at some consistencies among relative size of schools, and that's definitely one of the things that I'm finding is that when we compare ourselves, not only across the district, you're looking at a wide variety of schools, a wide variety of demographics, size of schools. When we narrow that pool down a little bit more and we look at more comparable schools, we're actually doing a little bit better than this. So what I also did was look at the immediately surrounding school districts and identified where we are in comparison to our immediately surrounding school districts. So in the ones that are in our area, we are certainly doing the best among our immediately surrounding districts. This is an interesting slide because this represents our 8th grade data over 18 years. And this kind of shows, and it helps us to explain some of the data, not all of it, but helps us understand it a little bit. But as we're moving along here, this right here is the year that the 8th grade math PSSA changed. So what you'll see here is this top line is the state, the top line is Springford, the bottom line is the state. So you'll see that in many instances we paralleled the state data that we expected to see, but what we have done is continue to grow over this, where we'll see the state data has plateaued a little bit. So it's just an interesting piece of data. I won't say that is the reason for the data, but I will say that is a piece of the reason that we certainly have to look at changing the assessment and how that's impacted us. When we look at our overall Future Ready Index, we're seeing our English Language Arts, again, has already met and exceeded the state target, and our math is approaching it, but we have some way to go as far as closing that gap. So while this does seem, this number does seem like something that we want to focus on, it is. It's an area that we want to help improve. We are happy and celebrating that we're meeting that interim target, but I will say I don't think for us as a district it's enough. We want to look at improving this, and I think that's something that everyone's on board with saying. We certainly want to continue working in that direction. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Nugent to discuss the 9 to 12 data.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. I know you've seen a lot of data, so we'll continue here with 9-12. So when you get to the high school level, obviously we're looking at a little bit different assessments. We're looking at our keystone exams, which are subject exams, obviously end of course exams. So we're going to give you a little peek at that. We're going to look at our advanced placement results, our ACT and SAT results, and talk a little bit about what we're doing at that level. So just taking a snapshot, you've seen this throughout the evening, so you can take a look at what we have in front of us there, which is our English language assessment last year, or for last year's graduating class. Dr. Murray's referenced the target dates across the bottom of the line. You'll see that we're significantly above those in all the areas, which is a benefit to us. We've had ebb and flow a little bit. These numbers are slightly lower than last year's. It's a different cohort. But again, very consistent with our performance throughout. So that just gives you the idea. The middle is math and algebra and biology. You've heard Dr. Murray reference advanced in some of our categories. Our largest advanced group is our science group. We have close to 60% or more advanced in science. And we have 57% advanced in math. And literature is our lower end, where we're around 20% advanced. So we do give our literature assessment in 9th grade. I don't know of another school in the state that does do that. Traditionally, I'll talk a little bit about remediation in a minute. I brought that up last year at one of our committee meetings. But that's our data from our Keystone exams. So you can take a look at our overall measurements. So you can see the high school has a little different setup than the other grades, because you're looking at on-track measurements, which would be attendance. And this one is not, you can see there's no score in this one here. That's not being calculated yet by the state. But one of the other things you see is college and career readiness. I point that out. You've heard a lot about Act 339. That's something that's a major part of our assessment, and you can see that we're doing well there, but we're not doing what we'd like to do. I think some of the board members have been involved in some of the committee level meetings where we've spoken about what type of opportunities we can provide for our students in the area of career readiness. So that's been a major focus of ours. Been working with the Future Planning Center on that. I think Mrs. Benner, when she was here, referenced that as well. So that's a continued focus for us. But you can see that, again, we are measuring in the blue and greens. One thing to point out is, when I see a downward arrow, of course, that grabs your attention. Blue down, green, but they're moving targets as well. So while your cohort may and you heard Dr. Murray this, you may be experiencing growth, but the target moves each year that gets higher. So that's going to continue to reach 2030. But again, we're far exceeding anything that the state requires at this point. So we look at advanced placement. This is an 8-year trend. It goes back further, but to give you an idea, the darker blue is the number of, as you can see, the number of students that take the test. So if you go over here, this past year, we had 736 students take an AP exam, and we gave 1,339 exams. So you can see a significant difference since we started. The support of the board has been overwhelming in supporting us with additional AP classes, and we've always been very appreciative of that. So that does give us the opportunity to have these numbers, because if our AP courses didn't go up, our numbers wouldn't go up. So next year, I can tell you, our orders were just made for next year, and I don't have the exact, but we're right about, I think it's 1,540 exams have been ordered. That means that's how many students have registered. That's how many exams have been registered for, and we're right around the 800 mark for students. So if you take 800 students and you look at our school population 9 through 12, which is about 2,500, do the math, you can see we have a lot of students that participate in our advanced placement program. But the more important part, I think, are the scores. So if you look at our advanced placement scores for last year, this year here, you can see, so your 5 is the 319, and then you have the 391, so you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So our highest number of test takers results was a 4. And for those of you that don't know, most of you do, but if you look at colleges, universities, Most colleges and universities will accept, many will accept a 3 as a passing grade and would allow credit to be earned for the universities. Some may be different, some don't accept it at all, but for the most part, colleges do accept a 3 as a passing grade. So you can see our scores have continually, I mean, it is what it is. You can see the numbers just keep going up. That's a testament to our students, but also to our advanced placement teachers. Remember, to be eligible to teach an advanced placement course, you must take a fairly significant training course. So we send teachers every summer, typically to LaSalle University, to take training to be eligible just to teach these. So this is a national curriculum, so this is a curriculum wherever you would be in the United States, you're taking the same course because our syllabuses must be approved in an advanced placement audit process. So every one of our teachers has to be audited, and I have to approve that audit every year for our students to have that match for them to be able to get the credits in the colleges that they go to. So a little bit about advanced placement there. Let's see, one other thing, this is our Scholar, Advanced Placement Scholar. This is something they started 2012, they started it then. You can see the numbers that we've grown with. One thing I want to point out, so these are the Scholar levels that they have, and we do put this in our gymnasium lobby. Many of you may see it when you come in. We post these students' names and give them recognition that way. But one thing new I'd like to point out, you see AP Capstone Diploma and AP Seminar and Research, and within the last month, I think we had a presentation from our teachers. And if you look down here, you can see we had 15 students receive a Capstone Diploma, and 10 of our students receive a Seminar Research Certificate. So that's pretty significant. We are excited about that. This is a new program for us, and already we have students performing at a very high level. So that's something new that you see did not exist over here. Not because we didn't have anybody necessarily, but this College Board just started reporting that information. So there are AP scholars. One of the things that I pointed out is the National Scholar, which is the 0 over here that you see. We finally had 1 in 2014, and now you see we've grown. We had 22 National Scholars this past year. So that's our advanced placement data. Move into ACT. So ACT is a subject test. It's math, science, English, and social sciences, I think. I have it right up here. So anyway, the significance with ACT is it's not your typical score point where SAT, everyone's familiar with, an 800 or 1600 score. ACT, the highest score that you can attain is a 36. So these are average numbers, and you can see over the course of time, one of the biggest significant pieces that you don't see in this particular slide are the number of test takers. Our number of test takers, when we first started giving the assessment, we had about 30 test takers. We're now into the 300s of test takers. Again, remember that students can participate in ACT or SAT, and many of them do both, because colleges often will allow you to choose which one you want to send as your score point for colleges. So that's our changes there. So that is English trends. So you can see it's fairly insignificant, 24 to 23. We've had up and down on that. We continue to look at this data, continue to dive into it to see where we can make changes in curriculum, et cetera. But moving forward, these are the math trends. You can see, so this year you're looking at this, the Springford is the dark blue and the light blue being the state. You can see we had a little dip there. We're up here high for a little bit. You can see we dipped down there, so very significant. Steady performance. Reading trended higher this year as a 25.1. Again, this is an average of all the students. So one thing the ACT does, it gives you a career ready number. I don't have that in the slides, but I can tell you that our students far exceed the career readiness for college level work. Matter of fact, the state average exceeds the college level number that they have. So that's just a point of reference for you. So that's reading, and then science. So again, science, we were 24.3. Last year we were 24.5. So you're talking insignificant numbers, but again, steady performance. The difference is the number of test takers, which we don't have here, but if you saw that, it would be pretty much like that, pretty much as the advanced placement was. So I apologize, I don't have that in there. So we look at the SAT. Now remember, the SAT was a reasoning test. Many of us remember that maybe when we were in school, but now they switched. So there was a significant change in 2016. They switched to a subject test, pretty much mirroring the ACT. So that's these results that you see. The 3-year trend is really with the new assessment. And you can see that our 3-year assessment for the SAT is in this particular, so you can see math. So readings on this side, so you can see we were fairly consistent. We were 579 last year, 577 this year, and math, we went up 1. But you get your total there, and then you can see the PA average, which, again, we put the PA average up there. I think it's important for you to see it. I understand that's not the level that we're expecting, but I just think it's important to see the PA average. It gives you an idea of where that is. One of the things I looked at last year, I didn't dive into it yet this year, is I looked at the number of test takers we have. You would be surprised. We are one of the largest schools in the state. So when you look at the number of test takers we had, which last year was borderlining 500 test takers, in the state of Pennsylvania, we rank very, very high, top 10 for our performance in SAT. So I know sometimes the board's interested in hearing those numbers, so I share that with you. So this is the last slide. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Murray, but I did want to point out, again, there's some significant changes in the graduation requirements, and if you're, as a board member, you may stay abreast of that, but those are data points that have not even been configured yet. So for students to graduate from high school in the state of Pennsylvania, the graduation requirements have changed significantly in the last 2 years. And matter of fact, the PDE has not even finalized, talked to you about that the other day, Mr. Cerisi, the state has not even finalized the criteria yet for what graduation requirements should look like for our junior class. So they're not even it's not even established yet. So there's some things that are really, really troubling to us, but at the same time, Dr. Murray's been in the meetings and Mr. Rizzo's been in the meetings. We're trying to stay abreast of that information, trying to make sure that our students are prepared the way they need to be. I feel comfortable that they are, but one of the things, and it's a significant piece, and I bring this up for this reason. First, I would just want to say, the Keystone exams begin in 7th grade. So that data that I just shared with you, that data included 7th grade students. It also included 8th grade students. And it included, of course, our 9th grade students in Dr. Weidenball's building, because they were the last group of students to take the Algebra 1 assessment. So that's banked data. So you see that data then is compiled and shared now. So biology, the same thing. We have biology students in 9th grade. We have biology students in 10th grade. And then all of our English students, literature, take the assessment in grade 9. Prior to this year, we were permitted to provide, matter of fact, we were mandated to provide remediation before we could even give a retest, because a lot of these results are as a result of retesting. We pick up a lot of students after remediation and retesting for a variety of different reasons without getting into the political end of things. Students spring forward high school, no high school, we are not permitted to mandate remediation anymore. Some people are in favor of that, whatever the case may be, that's whatever point of view you want to take. The point is, we would take students that didn't perform in the assessments and we would place them into remedial classes to help them to be proficient in these areas that the state mandated. We are not permitted to do that anymore. So we would now be giving retests to students that have not had remediation, which seems somewhat not smart in some respects. So with that being said, I just point that out because that is one thing that we're up against. And with that being said, we have a level of concern that our scores may not appear as fantastic as they have in recent years with that. And it's not a secret, it's not something that people aren't aware of. If you dive into it and you learn a little bit about it, you would see that. So I just point that out as another piece because that's a frustrating part for us. There's a new pathway system for graduation. There's some composite scores that should be out there that aren't out there yet because there's different pathways for students to attain their graduation requirements. So that's a whole other presentation for another day. I just wanted to point out the piece about remediation. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Murray for any questions that you all may have. I know that was a lot of information, so Dr. Murray, and I, of course, would answer anything that you might have as well.